Before trying to answer, notice what usually answers for you. A name responds, a story responds, a collection of memories responds, a social face responds, a defense mechanism responds, an old fear responds. But none of that is you. All of that is merely what appears when the question touches the central wound of the mind. Who am I when I am not describing myself? The ego is born exactly there, as a rushed response to avoid the abyss of not knowing. It does not want truth. It wants continuity. It does not want to see. It wants to survive as a narrative. And that is why almost no one truly looks. Almost everyone simply replaces one mask with another and calls it self-knowledge. He points out, with cutting clarity, that the greatest crime is ignoring what you truly are in favor of the story of who you think you are, and that all this concern with personal drama functions like a cloud covering the sun. What is being dismantled here is not the functionality of the person, but the hypnosis of identification, because the person can exist as an instrument, as an expression, as a temporary role. The problem begins when the role claims to be the actor, when the mask claims to be the face, when the thought I claims to be the entire reality. Then the prison arises, and the strangest part is that this prison has no visible bars. It is made of language, memory, comparison, desire, fear, and repetition. Observe closely. The ego is not a solid thing. It is a process. It needs to be thought in order to seem to exist. It needs to be remembered in order to seem continuous. It needs to be defended in order to seem real. Without thought, where is your character? Without memory, where is your psychological biography? Without comparison, where is the image you maintain of yourself? The ego is not an entity. It is an activity. It is a movement of contraction around the idea of separation. It is the habit of saying, this is me, and that is the other. It is the impulse to locate oneself as the center of experience, even when that center has never been directly found. That is why the real question is not how to improve the ego, nor how to purify it, nor how to make it attain peace. The real question is more radical. Who perceives the ego? Who knows that there is confusion? Who recognizes fear? Who witnesses thought? I am suffering because that which perceives the ego cannot be the ego. That which observes the mind is not trapped in the content of the mind. That which recognizes agitation is already not the agitation itself. What is observed changes. The observer remains formless. Nisargadatta insists on this point, stating that thoughts are objects in the mind, just as things are objects in the world. And he goes further. You are neither the field nor its contents, but that by which everything is perceived, the seeing, the hearing, the knowing. If this is only understood intellectually, nothing happens. The mind turns even truth into a decorative concept. But if this is seen directly now, something breaks, because then you realize you were never the content that arose in you, never the fear that passed through you, never the image that appeared in consciousness, never the thought that announced itself with the word I. All of that came and went. You remained. But then the mind asks, if I am not the ego, what am I? And here the error begins again, because it tries to turn the invisible into an object. It wants to find a new definition, a new identity, more spiritual, more refined, more elevated. It replaces the old character with a mystical one, abandons the crude ego, and manufactures the ego that says, I am consciousness. It abandons ordinary pride and fabricates sacred pride. This is the final trick. The ego will even accept disappearing as long as it can be the one that disappeared first. You cannot find yourself as an object, because you are that in which all objects appear. You cannot see yourself as a thing, because you are the very seeing. You cannot grasp your nature with the mind, because the mind itself already appears within it, and this deeply disturbs the psychological mechanism that has always lived by capturing, naming, classifying, and possessing. The ego only feels safe in the face of what it can reduce to a concept. But you, before being a concept, already are. Before the word, you already are. Before identity, you already are. Before any description, you already are. Notice the simplicity of this. The ego always speaks in time. It says, I was this, I will be that. I need to become better. I need to defend myself from what happened. I need to control what will come. Its raw material is past and future. Its strength comes from imagined continuity. But you, as conscious presence, do not come from the past nor move toward the future. You are that in which the idea of the past appears and disappears. You are that in which anxiety about the future forms and dissolves. Consciousness is not in crisis. What is in crisis is the mental image of yourself. And that is precisely why the question, who am I beyond the ego, must be heard differently. It is not about seeking a superior version of yourself. It is not about finding a more beautiful personal essence. It is not about discovering a true self as a final identity. It is about seeing that what you call I has never been stable, never been substantial, never been found outside thought, sensation, and memory. The false does not need to be forcefully destroyed. It only needs to be clearly seen. What is illusory loses its authority the moment it is recognized as illusory. So look without haste. When a thought arises saying I, is that you or just another perceived event? When an emotion tightens in your chest and says, I am not well, does that I have substance, or is it just language attached to a passing sensation? When someone praises you and something expands, or criticizes you and something contracts, who exactly was touched? That which knows expansion and contraction. Did it expand and contract, or did it simply witness both? If you can perceive the movement, you are not the movement. If you can notice the contraction, you are not the contraction. If you can recognize the character, you are not the character. The ego fears this investigation because it does not promise improvement. It threatens dissolution. And to the mind, dissolution feels like death. That is why there is so much resistance, not because the truth is distant, but because it is too intimate. So intimate it cannot be objectified, so obvious the mind ignores it, so silent that psychological noise covers it. The ego wants extraordinary experiences. Truth requires only absolute honesty. The ego wants special states. Reality only asks that you see what is already here. The ego wants to arrive. Consciousness never left. Beyond the ego, there is no enlightened person waiting to be discovered. There is the absence of the central confusion. There is the recognition that the psychological self is a transient construction appearing in what is not transient. There is the clarity that you are not inside experience as a small individual trying to control an external universe. The entire experience appears in you as consciousness. The body appears, the mind appears, the world appears, identity appears, everything appears, and what appears cannot be that to which it appears. Perhaps that is why this question should not be answered quickly. Perhaps it should act within you like poison to illusion. Who are you without your name? Who are you without the past you have told yourself 1,000 times? Who are you without the need to be someone in the eyes of others? Who are you in the gap between two thoughts, when the internal commentary has not yet resumed control? Who are you before saying, I am this, or I am not that? And what if, precisely in that gap, in that space, without autobiography, without defense, without image, lies that which was never born as ego, and therefore can never die as ego? And what if everything you call a spiritual search has only been delaying the moment when you finally face, without escape, without system, without role, the simplest and most devastating fact of all? The character can be seen, but that which sees never entered the story. And if that is true, what remains of the you that spent an entire life trying to protect itself? What is often called awakening is still, many times, just the ego using a new language to survive. Before it said, I need to win. Then it says, I need to transcend. Before, it sought human recognition. Now it seeks spiritual recognition. Before, it wanted to be admired by the world. Now, it wants to be admired by itself as someone who has understood. But that which truly sees does not need to declare itself awakened, does not need to assert purity, does not need to maintain any sacred image. Truth does not improve the character. It reveals that the entire character was only a temporary movement within that which never moves. And when this begins to be seen, even the search to become someone spiritually better starts to lose its charm, because what is real in you does not depend on improvement. So perhaps the most honest question is not, how do I get out of the ego, but who is it that wants to get out? See the subtlety. If there is an entity trying to free itself, that entity is already born from the illusion of separation, because consciousness does not need to escape anything. Only the character wants salvation. Only identity wants permanence. Only the mind wants a path, a method, a future result it can claim as an achievement. And that is why so many paths end up reinforcing exactly the illusory center they claim to dissolve. The ego is willing to be silent, to meditate, to renounce, to study, to fast, to repeat absolute truths, so long as, in the end, it can still secretly say, I was the one who achieved it. And as long as this hidden center remains intact, even the highest practice still revolves around the same fiction. Look now at direct experience. Sounds appear, sensations appear, thoughts appear, mental images appear, memories appear. Everything changes without asking permission. Everything flows without stability. But there is something that does not enter the flow as an object, something that cannot be seen from the outside, because it is the very space in which everything appears. It has no face, no age, no biography, no status, no failure, no superiority, no inferiority. And yet, without it, nothing could be known. The ego depends on it to seem to exist, but it does not depend on the ego in any way. The wave depends on the ocean. The ocean does not depend on the specific wave that, for a few moments, took form and name. That is why the fear of emptiness arises so strongly when identity begins to loosen. The mind interprets the absence of definition as a threat, when in truth, what it fears is the loss of narrative control. It prefers familiar suffering to centerless vastness. It prefers the pain of repetition to freedom without image. It prefers a wounded identity to no fixed point at all. But perhaps this emptiness is not absence. Perhaps it is space. Perhaps it is not the negation of existence, but the liberation from falsification. Perhaps what seems like nothing to the mind is fullness to being. Because when the false center weakens, what remains is not a lifeless void. What remains is effortless presence, existence without contraction, consciousness without character, peace without reason. And perhaps this is the most uncomfortable and most liberating point of all. What you call I may tremble, resist, and try to preserve itself. But what you truly are has never been threatened, has never needed to be defended, and has never fit inside the story the mind tells every day. So if any part of this touched something real within you, do not rush past it. Stay with this question in silence. Share this with someone who is also trapped in their own identity. Write in the comments what began to be seen in you today. And if this kind of direct inquiry resonates with your path, subscribe to the channel to continue moving through, layer by layer, everything that seems to be you but is not.